Hi everyone. In the earlier video, what happened is whenever we try to move the cursor right, so that previous cursor position is always used to fill with white color, right? And our cursor, the current cursor color, which is still a red color. Okay. So now we will try to restore the previous cursor position with an actual cursor buffer. Okay. So now I will jump back to the code. Okay. So now what I'm going to do, so we need some memory location to store our current buffer. Okay. So for that, I'm going to use a memory allocation library. Okay. Hash include library slash memory allocation library. Okay. And it needs to you the same library I need to refer in the library classes under its INF file. Okay. So now that pointer, what are the pointer which I'm going to store? Suppose it's a static um, EFI graphics BLT pixel. Okay, because I'm going to store the BLT pixel information. Okay, and this I'm going to name it as a M. Suppose a cursor buffer, and by default I'm going to initialize with null. Okay, and then now I have to initialize that buffer, right? So somewhere here, right, after we locate the gop. So if the cursor buffer is null, okay, so then let's allocate. So m cursor buffer is equal to allocate zero pool. How much size we needed? We needed the size of cursor size into cursor size. The height and width of the both the cursors in our case are same. So it's a cursor size into cursor size. And then the size of our pixel information, which is our RGB, which is 4 bytes. Okay. So I'll copy this and here that will be multiplied by size of our pixel BLT pixel. Okay. And now if the resource is not allocated, okay. So if m cursor buffer, if it is still null, which means there is a out of resource is happening, right? So then we will simply return EFI out of resources. Okay. So now first thing what I'm going to do is before I move any cursor here, right? Before I move to this while statement, what I'm going to do, so I'm going to store the current cursor into that buffer. Okay. So now what I'm going to do, so probably I will copy this. Okay, and we will rename it accordingly. Okay. So now what we are going to do, read the current cursor buffer. Okay, so at this point we have not wrote the cursor yet. So before we writing, we will store that pixel information into our buffer. Okay, so now it's a graphics output, and now where we wanted that buffer to be stored, it's a cursor buffer. Okay, and now which operation we wanted to perform. Okay, so now I will open this graphics output here. Okay, so now I need to store that pixel information into the buffer. Okay, so here I'm going to use the EFI BLT buffer, sorry, EFI BLT video to BLT buffer. Okay, so that pixel information I'm going to store it into my buffer. Okay, now the source and source X and source Y, right? So if you go back here, so it is going to read the rectangle data. Yes, that's what we needed. So source X and source Y, this is the one, it's a rectangle, right? So it needs 2 points, right? So first point is X comma Y, and then X plus width comma Y plus height. Okay, so that information will be placed into the destination. Okay, So that destination is our buffer. Okay. So now our source X is our what is the current cursor we have, which is this one, current X and current Y. Okay. So which is current X and then current Y. Okay. And then the destination inside this buffer, we are going to start with 0, 0. Okay. And then the height is cursor size and the width is cursor size. Okay. So now the current cursor information we have stored into this cursor buffer. Okay. And now here we always used to print this cursor with a white color, right? So now this one I'm going to comment off. Okay. So now here I'm going to create one API. Maybe suppose say it's a void function. So void, suppose say move cursor. Okay. And it needs the previous and the current cursor positions. Okay. So probably here I will use the same variables. Okay. I will copy this and I'm going to use it here. And then I will just make some alignments and then comma, comma, and then comma. Okay. So now I took the 4 arguments. Okay. So for now, what I'm going to do, so I will simply do nothing. Okay. So I will format the document. Okay. So now I will call this move cursor function below. Okay. So where exactly we used to fill the cursor? Here we used to fill the cursor, right? So now I'm going to comment of this function and now I will call that function move cursor. So I'm going to pass the current X, current Y and our previous, the last X and the last Y. Okay. So now let's jump back to this. Okay. So now what exactly we need to do inside this API, correct? So first we need to store the current information, right? Or maybe let's write a comment. First, we need to restore the previous cursor buffer. Okay. So restore previous cursor buffer. Okay, so that cursor buffer, the one which we have stored here before we jump into this while statement. Okay, so now here what I'm going to do, so for now I'm going to copy this and then we will modify the required arguments here. Okay, so now in this cursor buffer, so now the video earlier what we did, so that video information we used to store into this buffer. Okay, so now that buffer we are going to store it into the video. Okay, so which means we will read it from the display, we will store it into our memory, and that same memory information we are loading it back to the display. Okay, and here write the blt buffer rectangle. Okay, so I'm going to use this blt buffer to video. Okay, and then my source and y from this buffer, it's going to start with 0, 0, and where it has to be returned to the display, it's a previous x and y. Okay, so which means I'm going to start this buffer from 0 comma 0, the initial buffer, and then the last x and last y is the cursor position of the last cursor place where we have placed that x and y. We are going to give it as a destination. Okay, and now what happened? So we are going to restore the previous buffer as is. Okay, and now I have to, before I write the cursor, I need to store the current pixel information so that it can be restored later. Correct? So now here, what I'm going to do, so here, save the current buffer before writing the cursor. Okay. So now here, I'm going to use the, so now that buffer I have to store it, right? So now what I'm going to do, so here we already have the code, so I will copy this, not this, yeah, this one. Okay, and here I will paste it. Okay, so now the display information we are going to store it into this buffer, which is this cursor buffer. And in this cursor buffer, so the source of the display it is coming is the current x and current y, and the destination is this our buffer. In this buffer we are going to start with the 0. That's where we have the 0 0. Okay, and then I had to write the, so now what we did, so we have restored the earlier cursor information, and then before we write the cursor we are going to save the current buffer, and then I'm going to write the buffer. So for writing the buffer, this is what the code which we have used. So I will simply copy paste the codes to avoid the time consumption. Okay, so now here draw cursor. Okay, so I will uncomment this. Okay, so now here I will align it. Okay, my new cursor is the red color cursor, right? And then I'm going to fill the video fill, and then my source X and source Y are zeros because I need to start this red color with 0 comma 0, and then the destination is the new cursor position with its size. Okay, so now let's build it. EDK setup and then build. Okay, so now I will run the winhost.exe, go up sample driver. Okay, so now we can see, so it is not overriding the earlier information, right? So we can clearly able to say where is our cursor without affecting the background of the buffer, which means we are saving and restoring the buffer, and then we are trying to write our new buffer. And then when the cursor moves, we are going to restore the older buffer back, and then we are going to write the new buffer on top of it. Okay, that's it for today. Thank you.